Welcome, humans and demons alike. Welcome back to Vox Populi, the only news show you need. Let's get started. And we are once again starting with the UK. The leader of the far-right party Reform UK, Nigel Farage, has now resigned as a member of the UK Parliament, thereby triggering what is called a by-election in the area where he is from. This means that now there will be a re-election of his one seat. Other political parties like Conservatives and Labour have already stated that they won't stand a candidate at all. The Green Party remains unclear in this position. Farage and Reform UK, of course, use this as political propaganda bait, stating that not standing a candidate says more about them than us. We will keep you updated on this situation. Over in the USA, the orange clown in the White House has once again proven that he has indeed no intention of hiding his corruption whatsoever, calling the FIFA president Infantino after a USA striker received a red card.
That wasn't a foul. That wasn't even an infraction. That was two guys running full speed that happened to crash into each other. You can't take your foot and properly place it on somebody else's foot. You know, it's one thing to penalize somebody for the game, but how do you penalize them for a game that hasn't been played yet? It's very unfair. You can't do that. So, yes, I asked for a review by FIFA. I think the referee's call was horrible. And nobody talks about that. They talk about the red card like it's fine. Nobody talks. The referee's decision to red card. I didn't know what the hell a red card was. When I found out, I said, you got to be kidding. This guy just hands up, okay, your best player is not going to play next week or in the next game. I said, wow, that's a lot of power. That's terrible.
It is a truly bizarre situation. One that, if one would write it in a story or comedy sketch, it would be seen as obvious and too much of a stretch to even be funny. Donald Trump has reportedly called the president of one of the most corrupt organizations in the world, apart from the White House itself, the FIFA, in reaction to a red card that a striker of the USA had received in a match in the World Cup. After the phone call, the red card was revoked, proving that both FIFA and Donald Trump are not even pretending to hide their corruption anymore. We at VoxTech, of course, value correct and truthful information, so we'll now show you the situation in question. As a football referee myself, I can assure you this was one of the cleanest red cards I've ever seen. We will now once again jump over the ocean to take a look at the NATO meetup in Ankara, Turkey. First, we have to deal with even more Trump embarrassment. In a speech at the event, he claimed to be at the top of the list of Iran's assassinations and remarked that the war in Iran is important and not lost. Sadly, rather than standing up to him, NATO General Secretary Mark Rutte, who is also the current president of the Netherlands, declared his continuous support for the war, declaring that it is very important that Iran doesn't develop nuclear capabilities, despite there being no evidence that this is even their goal, and the former deal with Obama's America had already guaranteed that Iran wouldn't develop nuclear capabilities. On the topic of Iran, there have been new attacks on said Iran by the US, reportedly as a reaction of attacks from Iran on ships that try to get through the Strait of Hormuz without permission. The US will now allow the Ukraine to produce Patriots by themselves, an important part of their defense against Russia. In the closing statement of the NATO meetup, it is also stated that the Ukraine is a, quote, important part of transatlantic defense. And we end the news from the NATO meetup with once again a bizarre situation. Turkey President Erdogan had a very special gift for multiple presidents and prime ministers of multiple countries: a sharp Glock. Once again, a situation that couldn't even be made up in a comedy sketch. Even funnier is that at least the British still Prime Minister Starmer reportedly had to leave his Glock in Turkey, where it had to get defused first. a direct import would go against British strict gun laws. Largely, of course, more bad news from my home country, Germany. The Parliament, or Bundestag as it's called in German, has now passed another savings package, this time targeting the health sector. This is meant to stabilize the finances of health insurance companies, but this is only made possible through higher costs for consumers and a shrinking number of procedures that are actually paid for by these health insurance companies. If this continues, we'll be slowly turning into the USA, and nobody wants that, especially in the health sector. Before ending this news coverage, I want to thank this commenter specifically who pointed out my nice accent apparently. Dankeschön, ich fühle mich geehrt. And this was the most important news of the week. Have a wonderful day and always remember, trust us with your everything.